If you're just tuning into this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our thrilling narratives. Now settle in and let yourself be captivated by the awakening of Isabella Medina, a woman who, at 67, discovered that it's never too late to start over. The wall clock read 11:50 p.m. when Isabella Medina finally allowed herself to sit down. Her hands, marked by time and hard work, trembled slightly as she adjusted the hem of the red dress she had bought especially for the occasion. The Christmas dinner was flawless. The golden turkey sat at the center of the table, adorned with pine cones and candles. The roasted potatoes emanated an inviting aroma, and the traditional apple pie, a family recipe passed down through generations, awaited dessert time. The two-story apartment in the suburbs of Chicago sparkled with the colorful lights of the Christmas tree. Isabella had spent the entire morning carefully hanging each ornament, while her grandchildren raced around her, laughing and asking to reach the higher branches. Ava, with her insatiable curiosity at 8 years old, and Mark, a little philosopher at just 5, were the only genuine lights in Isabella's life since her husband David had passed away 3 years earlier. "Grandma, did you do all this by yourself?" Ava asked, pointing to the table. Isabella smiled, feeling the wrinkles around her eyes deepen. "Yes, my dear. Grandma wanted this night to be special for all of us." What she didn't mention was that she had also set aside $800 from her modest pension to buy gifts for everyone. A sleek watch for Robert, her son-in-law, a delicate jewelry set for Beatrice, her only daughter, an articulated doll that Ava had wished for months, and a set of collectible cars for little Mark. The neatly wrapped gifts under the tree represented 2/3 of what was left after her monthly contribution to household expenses. The sound of a key turning in the lock announced the arrival of Beatrice and Robert, returning from the company party where he worked. Beatrice entered first, her high heels echoing on the wooden floor. At 35, she had the sharp beauty of someone who knows their worth in the world. Her eyes, identical to Isabella's, quickly scanned the room, taking in every detail like an efficient scanner. "Did you finally finish, Mom? I thought you would take all night," she remarked, placing her bag on the side table without looking directly at Isabella. Robert followed his wife, loosening his tie with a sigh of relief. Tall and broad-shouldered, he had a physical presence that commanded immediate respect, although he rarely said more than monosyllables to his mother-in-law. Isabella felt a familiar tightness in her chest, that feeling of invisibility that had become her constant companion over the past 3 years since accepting Beatrice's invitation to live with them after David's death. What had started as a seemingly caring family arrangement had turned into something very different than she had imagined. The children came barreling down the stairs at the sound of their parents, and the room momentarily filled with genuine life and warmth. Isabella watched the scene with a contained smile as Beatrice distributed perfunctory kisses to the children before heading upstairs to change. "Come on, kids, let's sit down," Isabella called when everyone was ready, gesturing to the carefully arranged seats at the table. It was then that the moment that would change everything happened. Isabella approached the table with a serving dish of gravy, the last addition to the feast she had prepared. Her heart warmed at the sight of the family gathered, even though she felt that emotional distance growing each day. When everyone settled down and she finally moved to serve herself, Beatrice's hand shot out as a barrier, preventing her from reaching the food. "Mom, what are you doing?" Beatrice asked, her voice cutting like thin ice over a winter lake. Isabella blinked, confused. "I'm serving myself, dear." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Robert studied his empty plate intently, avoiding eye contact. The children watched wide-eyed, shifting their gaze between their mother and grandmother. "I think you misunderstood how things work around here," Beatrice continued, keeping her voice controlled, almost didactic. "You didn't contribute to this dinner. We bought the ingredients. You just prepared." The words hit Isabella like stones. Her mind vaguely registered that Beatrice was lying. Every penny for that dinner had come from her own pension. But the public humiliation weighed heavier than any factual inaccuracy. "Beatrice, she started, her voice shaking. "Please don't make this more awkward than it already is," her daughter interrupted, generously serving herself from the turkey Isabella had spent hours preparing. "The kids are hungry." Robert finally raised his eyes, briefly meeting Isabella's gaze before looking away again. There was no indignation there, just a silent acceptance that hurt more than any cruel words. Little Mark, observing the scene with the unflinching clarity of children, extended a piece of bread toward his grandmother. "You can have mine, Grandma," he offered, his small voice breaking the oppressive silence. Before Isabella could respond, Beatrice intercepted her son's hand. "Mark, no. Grandma's not hungry right now," she said, shooting a warning glance at her mother. "Is she, Mom?" Isabella felt something crystallize within her at that precise moment. It wasn't just the humiliation, nor the gratuitous cruelty. It was the intervention against the only genuine act of kindness directed toward her, coming from a 5-year-old. It was as if Beatrice couldn't stand even the smallest gesture of consideration in her direction. "Excuse me," Isabella murmured, rising with all the dignity she could muster. As she retreated to her small room at the end of the hallway, she could hear Beatrice explaining to the children that Grandma was just tired, as if her absence were a minor inconvenience in the family celebration. Isabella gently closed the door behind her and sat on the edge of her bed. She felt tears pressing at her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, something unexpected began to grow inside her. Not resignation nor self-pity. It was clarity. A crystal-clear clarity she hadn't felt in years. That night, as the sounds of dinner continued without her, Isabella Medina did not cry. For the first time in 3 years, she thought like a survivor, not a victim. Her gaze fell on the photograph on the nightstand. She and David, 40 years earlier, young and full of promise. He would never have allowed her to be treated this way. And suddenly, Isabella realized she shouldn't allow it either. "Tomorrow," she whispered to the photograph as a promise, "tomorrow I will uncover the truth." The next day dawned bright and cold, a typical Chicago winter. Isabella woke up before everyone else as usual. She prepared breakfast for the family: scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, pancakes with maple syrup, and set the table, working in methodical silence. When Beatrice came down the stairs, Isabella had already cleaned the kitchen and was folding a basket of freshly laundered clothes. "Good morning, Beatrice." Isabella greeted her with a calmness that even surprised herself. Beatrice briefly glanced up from her phone. Good morning. The kids will be down soon. Robert and I are taking them to the Christmas market downtown. Can you finish cleaning the living room while we're out?" It wasn't a request. It was an instruction. Isabella nodded, observing how her daughter didn't even mention the events of the previous night. It was as if the public humiliation had never happened, a familiar pattern in their interactions. "Of course, dear. Have fun." 2 hours later, the apartment was silent. Isabella stood still in the middle of the living room for a few moments, listening to the sounds of the empty house. Then, with newfound determination, she headed to Beatrice's bedroom. Her daughter's phone was on the dresser, forgotten in the rush to leave with the kids. Isabella hesitated for just a second before picking it up. Under normal circumstances, she would never invade someone's privacy, especially her own daughter's. But the circumstances had stopped being normal a long time ago. The screen was unlocked. Beatrice had always been careless with passwords, ever since her teenage years. Isabella opened the messaging app and found a group chat titled Family Issue. The participants were Beatrice, Robert, and Amanda, Robert's sister. The most recent conversation dated back 3 days. "Beatrice, it's all set. San Fernando Residence has an opening starting in February. $400 a month, and we can keep the rest of her pension. I'll talk to her after the new year." Robert: "Finally, I can't wait to have our space back, and the extra $800 will help a lot with the new car payments." Amanda: "Are you sure about this? I mean, she is your mother, Beatrice." Beatrice: "Amanda, you don't understand. She's been living here for 3 years, and it's like having a third child in the house, always needing attention, always complaining about something. Last week I dreamed that she died, and do you know what my reaction was in the dream? Relief. Pure relief." Robert: "I already spoke with Mike from the used furniture store. He'll give $300 for her old furniture. That antique dresser she treasures so much is probably worth more, but it's way too outdated for current taste." Isabella's hands trembled so much she almost dropped the phone. San Fernando Residence. She knew the place, a nursing care facility on the outskirts of town, known for its low costs and poor conditions. She had visited an elderly neighbor there once and had come away devastated by what she saw. She kept scrolling through the conversation, each message more revealing than the last. She found out that Beatrice and Robert had been planning this for months, that they considered her $1,200 pension as a resource to be exploited, that her monthly contribution of $600, along with the car insurance and other expenses she covered, totaled almost $800 a month they received from her. But the worst part wasn't the cold calculations. It was reading her daughter describe the relief she would feel at her death. It was discovering that the furniture she had brought from the home she shared with David, furniture laden with memories and meaning, had already been priced and was destined for strangers. Isabella returned the phone exactly where she found it and went back to her room. Sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands now strangely steady, she made a decision. She picked up her own phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in months. "Patricia, it's Isabella. Yes, it's been a while. I know. Listen, we need to talk. Do you still live in that apartment with the extra room?" When she hung up 15 minutes later, Isabella Medina had a plan. In the next 3 days, Isabella moved like a shadow through the house, carrying out her usual tasks with precision, but observing everything with new eyes. She noticed how Beatrice meticulously checked the bills every morning, her forehead furrowed in constant worry. She saw how Robert avoided her gaze during meals, as if her mere presence were a silent accusation. More painful was watching the children. Ava, always sensitive, seemed to sense the underlying tension and came closer to her grandma, offering spontaneous hugs and asking for bedtime stories. Mark, still innocent in his perception of the world, continued bringing colorful drawings that Isabella carefully stored in a special folder. On the morning of the 4th day, while Beatrice took the kids to school and Robert was at work, Isabella executed her plan with military precision. First, she headed to the bank. With firm steps, she approached the account manager, a middle-aged woman named Helen, with whom she had developed a cordial relationship over the years. "I need to remove my daughter as a co-owner from my account," Isabella explained, keeping her voice calm and resolute. "Of course, Mrs. Medina. That's quite common," Helen replied, not asking any unnecessary questions, for which Isabella was grateful. "Shall we also cancel all automatic transfers?" "Yes, please, and I'd like to open a new account, solely in my name." An hour later, Isabella had completely reorganized her finances. Her pension would now be deposited into an account to which only she had access. All transfers to Beatrice and Robert's accounts had been cancelled. Back at the apartment, Isabella methodically sorted through her belongings. She wouldn't take much, just clothes, a few books, photographs of David, and the small keepsakes she cherished most. The antique dresser Robert planned to sell would have to stay, just like most of the furniture. Isabella made peace with that loss. After all, objects were just objects. Before leaving, she sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. The words flowed with a clarity that surprised her. "Beatrice, when you read this letter, I will have already left. Don't worry about looking for me. I'm safe and well taken care of. For the past 3 years, I tried to be what you needed: a helper, a babysitter, an additional source of income. I believed that by accepting your invitation to live here after your father's death, I would be strengthening our family ties. I was mistaken. I discovered your plans to have me placed in San Fernando residence. I read your messages about how my death would bring relief. I learned of the plans to sell my personal belongings. I do not write this with anger, though the disappointment is deep. I write to inform you that starting today, I am taking control of my life again. My pension will no longer subsidize your lifestyle. My time will no longer be spent caring for your home without recognition. To the children, tell them Grandma loves them very much and that one day when they are older, perhaps we can meet again under different circumstances. Keep Mark's drawings and Ava's notes. One day, perhaps, I can receive them back. Goodbye, Beatrice. I hope that one day you understand that respect is not something granted by convenience, but a fundamental right of every human being, regardless of age. Your mother, Isabella." She folded the letter carefully and left it on the table. Then she picked up her small suitcase, took one last look around and walked out the door without looking back. Patricia Moreno was waiting for her in the car, parked a block away as arranged. At 64, Patricia had the energy and determination of a much younger woman. Widowed like Isabella, she had transformed her spacious apartment into a cozy space that would now house 2 women starting over in their lives. "Ready?" Patricia asked as Isabella placed her suitcase in the back seat. Isabella glanced one last time at the building where she had lived for the past 3 years. She felt a tightness in her chest, thinking about the children, but she pushed the pain away with the certainty of her decision. "More ready than I've ever been," she replied, getting into the car. As Patricia drove through the streets of Chicago, Isabella felt something unexpected growing inside her. It wasn't fear of the unknown, nor sadness over the family rupture. It was a nearly forgotten feeling of freedom, the lightness of finally letting go of a weight she had carried for far too long. Beatrice's reaction was as predictable as it was devastating. The first calls began 2 hours after Isabella left, seemingly concerned attempts to locate her missing mother. Isabella, who had turned off her old phone and was now using a new number known only to Patricia, didn't respond to any of them. 3 days later, when Beatrice finally comprehended the extent of the financial situation, the tone of the messages changed drastically, from feigned maternal concern to genuine panic. "She just left a voicemail," Patricia commented, holding Isabella's old phone, which they kept on just to monitor communications. "Should I play it?" Isabella nodded, bracing herself for what was to come. Beatrice's voice filled Patricia's cozy apartment. "Mom, you need to stop this madness right now. Robert just showed me that you cancelled all the transfers. How do you expect us to pay the bills? We had an agreement, remember? You agreed to contribute to the expenses when you moved in with us. This is practically theft. The kids are asking for you. You can't just abandon them like this. Call me immediately." Isabella and Patricia exchanged significant glances. There wasn't a single mention of concern for Isabella's well-being, only for the financial impact of her departure. She didn't mention the kids until she realized the money wouldn't be coming, Patricia remarked dryly. The situation escalated a week later when Robert showed up at Patricia's building. Isabella watched from the window as he confronted her friend in the parking lot, his face twisted in a rage she had never witnessed before. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice loud enough to be heard through the closed window. "She has obligations to us. The kids need her." Patricia, impressively calm in the face of Robert's physical intimidation, crossed her arms and responded in a low, controlled voice, "Isabella is not your property. She's an adult woman who made a decision, and I suggest you leave now before I call the police." The following weeks brought new tactics of manipulation. Beatrice began to casually appear at the nearby park by Patricia's apartment, always with the kids. Isabella watched from a distance, her heart tightening as she saw Ava and Mark playing, unaware they were being used as emotional bait. But Isabella stayed strong. With Patricia's help, she established a new routine. Every morning, the two walked to the community center for seniors, where Isabella quickly stood out for her skill in chess, eventually organizing a small club. On Wednesdays, she offered basic sewing classes for interested teenagers, sharing knowledge accumulated over 4 decades. "You're becoming a local celebrity," Patricia joked one afternoon as they walked home. Isabella smiled, recognizing the truth in those words. For the first time in years, she felt valued not just for what she could do for others, but for who she was, a woman with experiences, skills, and wisdom to share. Meanwhile, the financial consequences for Beatrice and Robert began to manifest. Without the $800 a month from Isabella, the couple faced increasing difficulties. By July, Isabella learned through mutual acquaintances that they had been forced to sell their house and move into a smaller apartment in a more modest neighborhood. One afternoon, while browsing a thrift store, Isabella spotted her antique dresser for sale for just $150, half of what Robert had hoped to obtain. The sight of that piece of furniture, which had belonged to David's grandmother and witnessed so many moments of their lives, stirred a pang of sadness. But Isabella didn't buy it. That part of her life was over, and she was building something new now. "Do you miss them?" Patricia asked one night as they shared tea on the porch. Isabella reflected for a long moment before answering. "I miss the kids every day. As for Beatrice, I miss the daughter I thought I had, not the woman she has become." Patricia nodded, understanding. Both knew that deep wounds take time to heal, if they ever heal completely. 9 months after her departure, Isabella received a handwritten letter. The envelope, addressed in Beatrice's familiar handwriting, sat on the kitchen table for an entire day before she found the courage to open it. When she finally did, the words surprised her. "Dear Mom, I'm writing this letter after many failed attempts. The words seem inadequate to express what I need to say, but I'll try nonetheless. First, I apologize. Not just for how I treated you in the last few years, but for the person I allowed myself to become. Looking back now, I barely recognize that woman. Cold, calculating, capable of speaking about her own mother as a burden to be removed. Since you left, our lives have changed drastically. We lost the house, as you probably already know. The apartment we live in now is small and noisy. Robert works overtime and is rarely present. When he is, His frustration often gets directed at me the same way we both directed it at you, with impatience and disrespect. Ava asks about you constantly. Mark saves every new drawing he makes in a special folder for when Grandma comes back. They miss you in a way that makes me realize how much you meant to them. Not as a babysitter or helper, but as a grandmother who loved them unconditionally. I now understand in the most painful way possible that I treated you as a means to solve financial problems, not as a human being with needs, feelings, and dignity of your own. I've learned that respect and consideration cannot be selective. They must be present in all our relationships, or they will eventually fade from all of them. I don't expect your forgiveness, nor do I ask you to come back. I just wanted you to know that your goodbye words resonated with me, even if belatedly. The kids made some drawings for you, which I'm including in this envelope. If you ever consider it possible for us to meet again, even briefly, we would be very grateful. With sincere regret, Beatrice attached to the letter were several colorful drawings. One depicted the family from Mark's perspective, where the figure of Grandma was larger than all the others. An elaborate heart from Ava, with the inscription, "Miss you, Grandma," written in carefully drawn letters. Isabella sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the letter open in front of her. Patricia found her like that, lost in thought when she returned from shopping. "Bad news?" she asked softly, placing the bags on the counter. "Not exactly," Isabella replied, passing the letter to her friend. "Just unexpected." In the days that followed, Isabella pondered her response. She consulted Patricia, who had become not only a housemate, but a true confidant and friend. She spoke with her group of friends from the community center, people who had gone through similar experiences of family rupture and reconciliation. Finally, she wrote her reply, measured, honest, without bitterness, but also without naivety. "Beatrice, I received your letter and the kids' drawings, which I will cherish. Genuine regret deserves acknowledgement. I accept your apologies for the past, although the wounds take time to fully heal. As for the future, I'm open to considering occasional meetings on neutral ground, perhaps a lunch in the park or an afternoon at the museum with the kids. However, this will depend on establishing clear boundaries and a commitment to mutual respect that has been absent in our previous relationship. In recent months, I have rediscovered who I am beyond the roles of mother, mother-in-law, and grandmother. I have built a life that brings me satisfaction and purpose. Any future relationship will need to respect this autonomy I have fought for. If you agree to these terms, we can arrange a first meeting in the coming weeks. I suggest Lincoln Park near the lake on a Sunday afternoon. The kids can play while we talk. Sincerely, Mom." 3 weeks later, on a sunny autumn Sunday, Isabella sat on a bench in Lincoln Park, watching the golden leaves slowly fall around her. Patricia had accompanied her to the entrance, offering presents and support, but they had both agreed that for this first meeting, Isabella should face it alone. When she spotted Beatrice approaching along the path, the children running ahead, Isabella felt a kaleidoscope of emotions: apprehension, cautious hope, enduring love despite everything. Ava spotted her first, her eyes lighting up with pure recognition. She ran over, arms wide open, and Isabella welcomed her into a tight embrace, the tears finally finding release after months of being held back. "Grandma," Mark exclaimed, joining the hug with the enthusiastic abandon typical of a 5-year-old. "You're back!" Isabella found Beatrice's gaze over the kids' heads. Her daughter looked thinner, with deep circles under her eyes and a vulnerability in her expression that Isabella hadn't seen since her teenage years. For a moment, she saw again the girl she had raised, imperfect but still her daughter. "I haven't come back, dear," Isabella gently corrected, smiling at Mark. "But I'm here now, and that's a start." As the children ran off to the nearby playground, Isabella and Beatrice sat side by side on the bench, a small space between them symbolizing the emotional distance that still existed, but perhaps could be gradually bridged. "Thank you for coming," Beatrice said, her voice low and unsure. "At 67, I've learned that it's never too late to give a second chance," Isabella replied. "Not to the previous situation, but to a new possibility." Watching the children play, Isabella Medina reflected on the journey of the past months. She had lost a home but found a place in her heart. She had experienced family betrayal, but also discovered her own strength. Above all, she had learned that dignity and self-respect have no expiration date, and that sometimes the greatest act of love we can offer, including to ourselves, is to set clear boundaries and defend them with courage. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interactions motivate us to continue bringing exciting stories like Isabella's journey. Until the next narrative.